One of our subscribers named Haley shared this story, and the moment her sister tore her passport in half, something inside her finally broke and sharpened. You aren't going anywhere. My sister looked me straight in the eye, ripped my passport down the middle, and dropped it into the toilet. The water swirled. $6,000. My Italy fund, my freedom, gone. She smirked. Now you have to stay and watch my kid. I turned to my parents, waiting for outrage, waiting for someone to grab her arm, to yell, to defend me. They stood in the doorway and laughed. In that second, I understood something. This wasn't a family home anymore. It was a prison, and I needed to escape. I watched my future disappear in dirty water, while the people who were supposed to love me treated it like entertainment. Before I tell you what I found in my father's office that changed everything, let me ask you something. What is the one thing a family member has done to you that you'll never forgive? I slammed my bedroom door and shoved a chair under the handle. My hands shook so badly I could barely zip my suitcase. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I grabbed the stack of invoices on my desk. 2 years of freelance graphic design gigs. Every logo. Every sleepless 3 a.m. deadline. Proof. My name is Haley. I'm 24 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been the family ATM. On my wall was a spreadsheet, $6,500. That was the Italy fund, not gift money, not daddy's allowance. It was skipped lunches, declined invitations, nights staring at a glowing screen while my friends built memories. And Brianna flushed it in 10 seconds. But the real number wasn't $6,500. It was $15,000. That's how much I had loaned my sister over the years. Emergency rent, car repairs that never happened, temporary help that permanently disappeared. Every time I told myself I was being supportive last week, she cornered me in the kitchen, not to ask for babysitting, to demand $6,000. A mommy makeover. Plastic surgery, she said she deserved for giving the family a grandchild. When I said no, that the money was for Italy, her expression didn't fall. It hardened. That's when I finally understood the math of a narcissist. To Brianna, my savings weren't mine. They were unclaimed assets, and my refusal wasn't a boundary, it was theft. In her twisted accounting system, my joy created imbalance. If she couldn't have the money, I couldn't have the dream. She didn't destroy my passport for childcare. She did it to reset the scoreboard, to bring me back down to zero. To keep the little sister little. I snapped my suitcase shut. They thought this was about a missed flight, a tantrum. They didn't realize the ledger was full. I wasn't leaving for the night. I was closing the account permanently. I walked downstairs calmly, not running. Running makes you pray. My boots hit the hardwood in steady rhythm. I didn't look back at Brianna, or my mother, or Brandon, her husband, hovering awkwardly behind them. The front door was my only objective. My fingers were inches from the brass handle when a hand slammed against the wood beside my head. My father. Richard. He didn't look like the man who taught me to ride a bike. He looked like a security guard denying entry. He reached up and slid the deadbolt into place. Click. It echoed like a verdict. He turned, arms crossed, filling the doorway. "You are not walking out on this family," he said.
"You're going back into that kitchen and apologizing to your sister." I stared at him. "She flushed my passport. She stole my savings, and you want me to apologize?" "She's stressed," my mother snapped, stepping beside him. Patricia no longer sounded soothing. She sounded irritated. "Stop being dramatic. Transfer the money to Brianna. If you give her the $6,000, we can forget this whole running away stunt." There it was. Clear. Cold. They didn't want peace. They wanted payment. "If you pay," my mother continued, "we can be a family again." The air left my lungs. This wasn't about healing. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about loyalty. It was about access. They weren't negotiating reconciliation. They were negotiating a transaction. And for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. I wasn't their daughter. I was liquidity, and I was about to become unavailable. It was a hostage situation. They were holding me in my childhood home until I paid the Brianna tax. I looked at my mother's face. For years, I thought she was a victim of Brianna's tantrums, just like me. I thought she walked on eggshells to keep the peace. But as she stood there blocking my escape, demanding my life savings to fund her golden child's vanity surgery, the illusion shattered. They weren't peacekeepers. They were human shields. They knew Brianna was a monster. They had created her, fed her, and enabled her. But they were too weak to deal with her rage, so they made a calculation. It was easier to sacrifice me, the quiet one, the good one, than to stand up to the tyrant. They would rather watch me bleed financial death than listen to Brianna scream for 5 minutes. They weren't protecting the family. They were protecting their own comfort at the expense of my survival. "You're not asking for help," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You're extorting me." "We're parenting you," my father shouted, his face reddening. "Now give us the phone and make the transfer, or you aren't leaving this house." I looked at the deadbolt. I looked at my father's clenched fists. I realized I couldn't push past him. He was stronger than me, and he was desperate. But he forgot one thing. I grew up in this house, too. I knew where the skeletons were buried, and I knew exactly where he kept his secrets. "Okay," I lied, stepping back and dropping my bag. "You win. I need to use the bathroom first. Then I'll pay her." They relaxed, just a fraction. The smug satisfaction on my mother's face made me want to scream, but I swallowed it. I turned and walked away from the door, but I didn't head for the bathroom. I sprinted toward the back of the house, straight for the one room my father thought was his sanctuary. I pivoted on my heel and bolted down the hallway. My father lunged, his fingers grazing the strap of my bag, but he was too slow. I reached the heavy oak door of his home office, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. I twisted the deadbolt and engaged the secondary floor latch just as his shoulder hit the wood from the other side. The door shuddered, but it held. This room was his sanctuary, built to keep the world out. Now it was keeping him out. "Open this door, Haley!" Richard screamed, pounding on the wood with a rhythmic, terrifying violence. "You are making this worse. You are destroying this family." I didn't answer. I didn't waste breath on screaming back. I dropped my bag and slid into the leather chair behind his massive mahogany desk. My hands were steady now. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a cold, humming clarity. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the auditor. I woke the computer monitor. It glowed to life, demanding a password. I typed it in without hesitation. My mother's birthday, followed by his favorite football jersey number. He had never changed it since I set the system up for him 5 years ago. Access granted. While they screamed and kicked at the door, vibrating the floorboards beneath my feet, I navigated straight to the Family Cloud server. I wasn't just looking for a way out. I was looking for the ammunition I knew was buried here. My father was a hoarder of digital documents. He kept records of everything, convinced he was the master of his domain. First, the security system. I pulled up the timeline from 20 minutes ago. There it was, the high-def footage of the hallway, Brianna tearing the passport, the smirk, the flush. Then the footage of the living room, my father blocking the door, my mother demanding the transfer. It was all there. Extortion, false imprisonment, destruction of property. I downloaded the clips to my phone and emailed a backup copy to a secure server. But I wasn't done. I knew there was something else. For months, I had noticed odd letters arriving from banks I didn't recognize, letters my mother would snatch from the mailbox and hide in her purse. I opened the folder labeled Finances and clicked through the subfolders until I found one simply named B. I opened the first PDF. It was a credit card statement. The balance was $15,000. The cardholder's name was Brandon, Brianna's husband, but the billing address wasn't their apartment. It was a P.O. box in my father's name. I opened the next one, another card, $12,000. Another $18,000. The total debt was nearly $45,000. I stared at the screen. the blue light reflecting in my eyes. This wasn't just Brianna being bad with money. This was identity theft. She had opened secret credit cards in her husband's name to fund her lifestyle. And my parents weren't just ignoring it, they were facilitating it. They were receiving the statements, hiding the mail, and helping her make the minimum payments from their retirement accounts to keep Brandon from finding out. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just shielding her from consequences, they were active accomplices in financial fraud. They were willing to let Brandon's credit score implode, willing to let him drown in debt he didn't create, just to keep their golden child happy. It was the ultimate expression of the enabler's guilt. They had become criminals to avoid the discomfort of holding her accountable. Outside, the pounding stopped. "Haley!" My mother's voice came through the wood, tremulous and weeping. "Please, we just want to help you. Don't do anything you can't take back." "I'm not doing anything," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm just forwarding the mail." I compiled the credit card statements into a single PDF dossier. I attached the security footage of the passport destruction. I opened a new email, typed Brandon's work address in the recipient line, and added the subject, "The debt you don't know about." I hovered over the send button. This was the nuclear option. This would end Brianna's marriage. It would expose my parents. It would burn the family tree down to the roots. I thought about my $6,000 swirling in the toilet. I thought about the deadbolt on the front door. I clicked send. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Haley. I am being held against my will at 2847 Maple Street. My father has barricaded the doors and is refusing to let me leave. I am in immediate danger. I didn't wait for the operator's questions. I saw the red and blue lights wash over the walls of the study, painting the room in a strobe of emergency. They were fast. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. I thought the nightmare was ending. I thought the cavalry had arrived to break the siege. I unlocked the deadbolt. The moment a latch clicked, the door didn't just open, it was flung wide. But it wasn't the police standing there. It was Brianna, and she didn't look like the tyrant who had been pounding on the wood seconds ago. She looked like a victim of a massacre. Her blood streamed down her left cheek. Deep, jagged scratches marred her face, fresh lines that I knew with sickening certainty had been carved by her own fingernails in the hallway while I was on the phone. Her blouse was ripped at the shoulder, exposing her strap. Her hair was a chaotic nest. "Help!" she screamed, the sound raw and terrifying. She threw herself backward into the hallway just as the front door burst open and two uniformed officers stormed in. "Help me! She went crazy! She tried to kill me!" She collapsed at the feet of the lead officer, sobbing hysterically. Her body shaking with what looked like trauma, but was actually adrenaline. She pointed a trembling finger at me, standing frozen in the doorway of the office. "My sister, she attacked me. She stole my diamond ring, and when I tried to get it back, look what she did." I stood there, my hands empty, my bag on the floor. I hadn't touched her. I hadn't been within 10 feet of her since I ran for the office. The officer looked at me. He didn't see a hostage who had locked herself away for safety. He saw a cold, unmoving woman standing over a bleeding, weeping mother. "Ma'am, let me see your hands," the officer ordered, his hand resting on his holster. "I didn't touch her," I said, my voice calm, but tight with shock. "She did that to herself. She's lying." "She's not lying." My mother's wail pierced the air. Patricia rushed forward from the kitchen, dropping to her knees to wrap her arms around Brianna, cradling the monster she had created. She looked up at the officer with tears in her eyes, tears for the wrong daughter. "Haley just snapped, officer. She's been unstable for weeks. She was demanding money from us, and when we said no, she lost it. We tried to keep her in the office to calm her down until you got here." I looked at my father. Richard stood by the door, his face a mask of sorrowful regret. He nodded slowly. "It's true. We were trying to protect her from herself. We didn't want to call you, but she got violent." It was a masterclass in betrayal. They weren't just lying, they were rewriting reality in real time. They were willing to send me to jail, to give me a criminal record, to destroy my entire future, just to protect Brianna from the consequences of her own tantrums. They had chosen their side, and it wasn't the side of truth, it was the side of least resistance. The officer spun me around, cold metal bit into my wrists. "You are being detained for domestic assault." I felt the handcuffs click shut. The sound was final, suffocating. The physical weight of them dragged my arms down, pulling my shoulders forward. I was being arrested in the home I grew up in, framed by the people who raised me. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, pushing me toward the door. As they marched me past the huddle of my family, Brianna looked up from her theatrical sobbing. She buried her face in my mother's shoulder, pretending to hide her pain, but she turned just enough so only I could see her. The tears stopped instantly. The fear vanished, and there it was again, that slow, toxic smirk. "I win," her eyes said. "You tried to fight the golden child, and now you're going to lose everything." The injustice burned in my throat like bile. They had stolen my money, destroyed my property, held me hostage, and now they were framing me for a felony? It looked like the end. It looked like the villain had won. But Brianna forgot one thing. She forgot that I wasn't just the sister she bullied. I was the one who set up the Wi-Fi. I was the one who installed the apps. And I knew exactly what the little blinking eye in the corner of the ceiling had seen. I kept my voice steady as Brianna screamed and my mother begged. "Officer, my phone is in my back pocket. Unlock it." The Blue Shield app loaded everything. He hesitated, then pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and pressed play. In silence, we all listened. My father threatening me, blocking the door. Brianna clawing her own face before pretending I attacked her. The officer removed my cuffs and turned on her instead. Brianna shrieked. The footage was fake! But he arrested her for filing a false report and destroying federal property. That was when Brandon rushed in, not to save her, but to confront my father with proof she had stolen his identity and opened credit cards in his name. He told Richard he was pressing charges, taking Mason, and filing for divorce. My parents stared at me, furious and helpless. My father snapped that I was homeless, but I just laughed. I handed him the deed paperwork he had put me on the house title years ago when his credit was wrecked. I now owned half and was forcing a court-ordered sale unless they paid me $50,000 in 30 days. They didn't have it. 6 months later, I was eating gelato in Rome when the deposit hit my phone. $62,450. Brianna had pled to probation. Brandon got custody, and my parents lost their home and now lived crammed into an apartment with her. I took a selfie, sent it to the family chat with the caption, "Worth the wait," and blocked them all. For the first time, I felt free. Family isn't sacrifice without return. Peace comes from walking away.